on the rocket to lift it up.
Now, in order to get to space, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It also has to go sideways really, really fast. At liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down on the rocket. But as we ascend, we'll start to tilt the engines, which is technically referred to as gimbaling. That turns the rocket horizontally. We're still going up, but we're also now heading horizontally away from the launch pad, and that maneuver is referred to as a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to get to about 7.5 kilometers per second, or about 17,500 miles an hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and to get into orbit. To help demonstrate the concept, imagine we were firing a cannon from a really high mountain. The cannonball will arc, and then gravity will pull it back down to Earth. As you increase the power, the cannonball will arc and land further and further away. Eventually, you could continue to increase the power, and the cannonball will go so fast that it ends up in free fall around the Earth. Gravity's still pulling on it, but it's going so fast that it never hits the ground. This arc that constantly misses the Earth is what we call an orbit. So when we get to liftoff today, keep an eye out on the orientation of Falcon 9. You'll see it initially start to go straight up until about T plus 10 seconds, at which point we'll start to shift orientation so Falcon 9 can start picking up sideways velocity. But before we get to that, why don't we check in on the status of the vehicle for today's launch?
We are currently just under T-minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We are currently waiting for the transporter erector, or TE, to retract, and that's that truss structure right next to the vehicle. First, the TE clamps will open, and the transporter erector will then begin to retract away from the rocket slightly, and at T0, hydraulics will pull the TE farther away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. Now, the TE provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing.
Tanks pressing for strong back retract.
Now, those clamp arms, you can see those clamp arms opening around the Falcon's second stage there. You can see that strongback TE is started to move away from the vehicle there. Now, the first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Super chilled liquid oxygen is our propellant oxidizer, and that is what you see creating those white clouds that you can see around Falcon 9 there. And that's because the warm, humid ambient air causes the liquid oxygen to turn into a gas around the booster. Now, first stage should finish prop loading at T-minus 3 minutes, just under 10 seconds here. And the second stage will finish prop loading about a minute after that at T-minus 2 minutes.
Poco bleed.
At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9...
Lock load, close out.
Falcon 9 will be in startup, and you heard that call out for stage 1 LOX load complete. And when Falcon 9 gets in startup at T-minus 60 seconds, this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken control of the launch countdown. And just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin 1D engines using that T-type ignition source we talked about, and we're set to lift off. The Starlink payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is still looking favorable, and the range is green for launch. So here at just over T-minus 2 minutes, let's listen in on the terminal countdown.
Stage 2, LOX load, close out.
We have just finished loading our second stage. Our Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with over 1 million pounds of kerosene, RP1, and liquid oxygen. Again, that white cloud coming from the booster there towards the middle is normal and expected. That is venting from the TE LOX line. Again, at T-minus 1 minute, Falcon 9 will go into startup, and this is when stage 1 and stage 2 will begin pressurizing for launch, and the flight computer will have taken control of the countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup, and in just a few seconds, the launch director should give the final go for launch.
Stage 2, pressing for flight.
Falcon 9, Starlink LDs go for launch.
You heard that call out for go for launch. All systems are go.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Let's listen in to the terminal count and watch as Falcon 9 takes our Starlink satellites to orbit.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Stage 1, pressing for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1, propulsion is nominal.
What a beautiful day for a rocket launch here. As you can see, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying our stack of 60 Starlink satellites to orbit. Moments ago, we throttled the engines down in preparation for max Q, or the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the rocket will see.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Vehicle is supersonic, and we should be passing through max Q here in just a few seconds.
Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
We just passed through max Q, and in about a minute, we will have 3 events happening back to back, and that's main engine cutoff, or MECO, stage separation, and second engine start 1. So first, main engine cutoff. That is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines that you can see burning right now will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation. And this is where the first stage separates from the second stage.
Control has begun.
With the first stage making its way back to land on our drone ship, just read the instructions, while second stage continues on its journey to its third event, which is second engine startup 1. Now this is where the 1 MVAC engine on our second stage lights up and propels that second stage along with our Starlink satellites to orbit. What a beautiful view of those 9 M1D engines burning there on beautiful clear day. And we're coming up on main engine cutoff shortly here in just about 10 seconds.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And recognition.
You can see in that beautiful footage that we did just have MECO, stage separation, and second engine startup 1. Those grid fins are coming out on the first stage there on the left. And in just a few seconds, we should have our fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
You heard the call out, and you can see on your video there that we have had successful fairing deploy. And again, today's flight marks the 40th time that SpaceX has reflown a Falcon fairing half since November of 2019. Now, this is also our first fifth reflight for one of our fairing halves and a third for the other half. In order to recover these fairing halves for future flights, we will be attempting to recover them again with the help of our recovery vessels, Go Searcher and Go Navigator.
Stage 2 continuing towards its first orbit on the right-hand side of your screen. Left-hand side of your screen, you can see Falcon 9's first stage reorienting itself for its next two activities. That'll be 2 burns to come back safely to Earth. First of those being the entry burn. That's where we'll ignite 3 of the Merlin 1D engines to help slow down the first stage as it re-enters the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn will happen closer to the drone ship. That's the landing burn. That's where we'll ignite just the single center Merlin engine. That'll bring the first stage's velocity rapidly down to 0 for a soft touchdown. On the right-hand side of your screen, second stage continuing to burn nominally, acceleration right down the middle. And you can see the glow of the nozzle there. Now, if you are just catching up with us, we did have a...
Stage 2 on nominal trajectory.
We did have a successful launch of Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And first stage on the left-hand side of your screen is headed back to our drone ship named Just Read the Instructions, stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. Second stage heading on the right-hand side of your screen is headed to its first orbit. As a reminder, today's mission does mark the second flight for this booster. If you happen to catch fairing separation earlier, this will be the first fifth flight for one of those fairing halves and the third flight for the other half. Reusability is critical to what we do here at SpaceX. It allows us to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, and that drives down the cost. Now you can see the grid fins extended on the left-hand side of your screen. Every so often, you'll see puffs of white gas. That's attitude control coming from the first stage to help reorient us to get the 9 Merlins on Falcon 9 pointed towards the Earth. Those Merlin engines are optimized for thrust at sea level. They help Falcon 9 achieve about 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent. Meanwhile, the Merlin vacuum is optimized for space. That's why it has that larger nozzle. Now, coming up here is entry burn. Keep an eye out on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is safe.
This burn expected to last about 20 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And successful shutdown of those 3 Merlin engines. Now, if you followed along our missions in the past, you'll know that soot
Stage
on
2
the
continues
first stage
on nominal trajectory.
is an indication that the rocket has flown before. That's because we use rocket-grade kerosene, or RP1, as our fuel in Falcon 9. That's a carbon-based propellant. As we burn it, it generates soot. So with the engines down, as we're coming in through the Earth's atmosphere, the soot from the plume comes back up on the first stage and deposits it along the surface of the vehicle. Now, if we didn't do that entry burn, the first stage would come in very quickly in the atmosphere, and the aerodynamic forces could
Stage
cause
1
it to
is
rip apart.
transonic.
So that's why we do that entry burn. And we did temporarily lose the video feed, but we'll hopefully... There we go. Beautiful view. Now, at this point, since we're in the Earth's atmosphere, those grid fins will take over orientation and trajectory back towards the drone ship. Now, coming up, stage 1 landing burn will begin. Shortly after landing burn ends,
Landing burn startup.
the second stage's engine will shut down. We should be in our expected orbit there. So keep an eye out, see if we can get a video feedback for the first stage.
Stage 1, landing leg, deploy.
Fantastic. Right down the middle. That's our 85th
Stage
successful
1, landing
recovery.
burn.
100th, 18th successful launch of the
Stage 2,
Falcon 9.
FTS is safe.
Now keep an ear out here for second engine cutoff number 1 on the second stage.
MECO.
And with that, navigation officer, we did hear the call out there for SECO. Navigation officer will be checking
Expected loss of signal.
the
Cape.
parameters. Make sure we are in our intended orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Fantastic news. So from here, we do have a coast phase followed up by the second burn of our second stage engine. These additional burns allow us to modify the orbits of the payload more efficiently than if we were to launch directly into our final orbit. That's just one of those quirks of orbital mechanics. And today, our second stage will coast for 35 minutes until we reach apogee, which is the highest point of the orbit. Views here on your screen of the fairing and then the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. So once we reach the highest point of the orbit, we will reignite the second stage for a short burn. And you can follow along the progress of the second stage with this animation showing where we are around the Earth. We'll be back here at T plus 44 minutes and 30 seconds for second engine start number 2. See you soon.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland. Expected loss of signal, Bermuda. Expected loss of signal, Newfoundland.